All the way back at the Christmas of 1989, I was blessed to receive my very own Sega Genesis. I can't tell you how happy I was to get it, opening that black box adorned with the arcade classic Altered Beast, the free pack-in at the time. But contrary to what you might think, my earliest days with the platform were not what I'd call completely enjoyable. At that point in the hardware's life, the library was still quite anemic, and my access to games beyond the pack-in was pretty much at the mercy of what my friends and schoolmates lent me and the odd rental I could afford. And for weeks I was exposed to a number of titles I just didn't find very appealing. I loathed Space Harrier 2, Super Thunderblade failed to impress, Thunder Force 2 whooped my ass, and I had absolutely no idea what the hell was going on in the last battle. I needed a good game and I needed it fast. Being a fan of the arcade and Master System Shinobi games led me to one of my very first big purchases for the Genesis shortly thereafter. The Revenge of Shinobi had been getting excellent reviews from every major publication I was privy to. Developed by Sega R&D 2, the hype for this was real, and I was ready for something to truly show off the 16-bit power I had been promised. But it took some savings to make it happen. In those early days, Genesis software had been really expensive. Games like The Revenge of Shinobi were $60 and $70 at many retailers, but I buckled down, worked hard, and it was eventually mine. 4 years ago, in 2019, I did a dedicated video on The Revenge of Shinobi. While I expressed a ton of opinions on it, it was more a strategy guide than a proper review. And in this episode, we will be fixing that. Here is The Revenge of Shinobi, one of my most memorable experiences on the platform. The Revenge of Shinobi picks up 3 years after the end of the original arcade Shinobi. Our ninja master Joe Musashi has settled down and is about to get married. Yet stirring in the shadows are the remnants of the diabolical terrorist organization Zed, now reformed and more powerful than ever. Rebranding itself Neo-Zed, their first mission is to exact retribution against the Shinobi and his Oboro ninja clan. The village is attacked, its members slaughtered, and Joe arrives to a heartbreaking scene. His master has been mortally wounded, and his fiancée Naoko has been taken hostage. As his master dies, the Shinobi arises with a burning desire to avenge his fallen comrades and rescue his beloved. He then chases Neo-Zed across the globe to burn their organization to the ground. And so, the Revenge of Shinobi begins. Like Shinobi before it, this is a side-scrolling action game where the main goal is to get your character from point A to point B without getting yourself killed. But where the original Shinobi was modeled after the design of Rolling Thunder, the Revenge of Shinobi expands things in every direction. Stages are larger and more vertical, and all have a much more focused intensity on platforming. Instead of the awkward and slow upward super jumps of the original, Shinobi now has a double jump to get to higher ground. You'll need that versatility because many of these stages are loaded with insta-death pits that can be quite difficult to deal with. Of course, on the ground, the Shinobi remains a walking killing machine of near limitless potential. At distance, you have throwing knives to decimate your enemies, and in close, you have a series of melee attacks at your disposal. Should you get a power pack icon, the Shinobi becomes even more potent, now capable of far more powerful weaponry like double damage knives, a devastating sword attack, and a blocking skill that can stop most projectile-based offense. This block must be engaged by moving left and right, deflecting the projectile high or low. The power pack icon only lasts as long as you go undamaged, however. Take a hit and it's right back to normal old Joe. There are other things to find as well. Crates are hidden all over every stage and filled with more ammo for your knives, hearts to replenish your life, extra lives, and the coveted extra ninjutsu, or ninja magic to put it more simply. You have 4 different types that can be used at any point in the level, including against the bosses. There's Ikazuchi, the art of the Thunder Shield. This allows you to take a number of hits without damage. There's Karyu, the fire dragon that damages everything on the screen. Fusion is the art of floating, which adds height and distance to your jumps. And finally there is Mijin, the powerful art of self-destruction. This is a last resort power that does massive damage to everything in the blast radius, taking one of your lives in the process. Also in those crates are explosives that damage you if you are too close. They use slow fuses if you aren't near, or detonate immediately if you're touching them. Stages range from simple walks through a garden, to the cliffs of a massive waterfall, to the back streets of a major city. The Revenge of Shinobi really does pack in a ton of locations for its meager 4 megabits of ROM. Finally, you won't find a game in that first year as well balanced as this in terms of difficulty. Easy gives you a ton of life and health to power through and see the ending after only a few play sessions. Normal drops the lives down to 3 and shortens the life bar a tad. The two highest difficulty settings, hard and hardest, give you a single life and a tiny life bar, making it a mode for seasoned veterans only. Be aware of your score. It not only brings extra lives, but it also extends your life bar. Those extra lives are pivotal to success on the harder settings, thanks to getting only 3 continues. Run out, and it's game over for our hero. At the time of its release, The Revenge of Shinobi was one of the best looking titles on the console market. The strength in its presentation relies almost completely in its great variety of locations and enemies. It really does feel like Joe Musashi is chasing these guys all over the globe, and the boss encounters reflect that same feeling of always taking on something new. At first it's just a giant samurai warrior, but then it's a shadow ninja on the dance floor, supercomputers with organic brains, huge dinosaurs, and even a couple of comic book heroes. All those battlegrounds are set against some great looking backdrops as well. Multiple layers of wonderful, highly detailed backdrops in fact. Some even have the ability to transition between the fore and backgrounds, giving you 2 distinct planes to battle across. These areas are so well designed and appealing, from the light pollution of a city sky to the color-cycled water splashing behind you. Everything sets a tone and ambiance that makes this adventure well worth taking. The animation is indicative of a cartridge from 1989, but it serves the purpose well and never looks overly stiff or unnatural. This game was also something of a marvel for its inclusion of tons of pop culture references. You'll notice on the title screen the ninja depicted is none other than Sonny Chiba, star of the hit Japanese show Kagi no Gundam, that follows the adventures of Hattori Hanzo. Then there are the enemies that look an awful lot like John Rambo, the boss that is clearly inspired by the Terminator, another boss that is a mirror image of Godzilla, and yet another boss that impersonates both Spider-Man and Batman. The Revenge of Shinobi was full of visual flair that really made you feel like it was a collection of your favorite subjects wrapped up in one awesome amalgamated adventure. As if that wasn't enough, the ninja magic looked pretty damn cool as well. Back when I first got The Revenge of Shinobi, I saw a credit on the title screen, music by Yuzo Koshiro. This was incredibly rare back then for anyone from the Japanese development team to be featured this way. Now of course I had no clue who this fellow was at the time, but after playing, it became clear he deserved his name front and center, because the music in this one is nothing short of spectacular. This is FM synth at some of its finest moments. The kind of music that lifts an experience above the rank and file. It makes the entire journey more exciting, more appealing, and brings you into the locations in a way the visuals could never do alone. Even the sound effects are outstanding. This is one of my favorite soundtracks on the Genesis, so I've prepared an absolute feast for your ears. Let's dive into this masterpiece, courtesy of one Yuzo Koshiro. Trying to critique the Revenge of Shinobi is a bit like trying to give an honest opinion about your first car. You know deep down inside that the stuff you owned afterwards was better, but you hold such nostalgia for the original, you just don't want to say anything negative about it. That's how I feel here, and those positive feelings definitely play a huge part in how I view this game today. At its original release, I credit it as one of the few games that legitimized the existence of the Sega Genesis. After being exposed to what I consider an extremely weak launch lineup, it raised the bar so high it was nothing short of a killer app for the device. This is so much better than the vast majority of what was available for the better part of those first 2 years. Between the solid visuals, the memorable soundtrack, and the challenging arcade gameplay, there is very little here to complain about. But like a great many things that come first, sometimes a follow-up improves upon it in many ways. And it's extremely difficult to judge this now and not consider the upgrades that would come in later games like Shadow Dancer and Shinobi 3. The simple arcade gameplay in the Revenge of Shinobi looks pretty dated next to commanding your very own attack dog in Shadow Dancer, or running, kicking, and wall jumping in Shinobi 3. I would hazard a guess and say many of you would pick one of those later entries in the series as the superior, and I'd be hard pressed to form a legitimate defense. Even so, there is something magical in the Revenge of Shinobi, a synergy of graphics, sound, and gameplay that merges into the perfect old-school arcade-style escapade. With every location, you become more enthralled with the chase. You become obsessed with seeing the next boss. And when you face the final labyrinth and the beast within, that sense of helplessness you started out with transforms your resolve into nerves of steel. You may have failed at it the first time, but you will see it through. It's one of the very few 16-bit games that added a genuine emotional element to how the story played out. That final battle to determine the fate of Joe Musashi's fiancée weighed heavy on me when I failed it, and the fight to get back was nothing short of a personal mission to do better. In case all that sounds unbelievably nostalgic, well, that's because it is. But those feelings are no less authentic. I absolutely adored this game and I still love it over 30 years later. We can argue the technical superiority and the gameplay additions of its sequels all day long, but the Revenge of Shinobi is still nothing short of a masterpiece of 16-bit game design. If you owned a Sega Genesis or Mega Drive back then, this was a showpiece, a game changer, and a title that made you happy you chose the platform. The Revenge of Shinobi also has one of the most interesting revision stories you'll ever hear on the old Sega Genesis. When this was originally released in Japan as the Super Shinobi, there were a number of differences from the US release. You'll notice that after the Spider-Man battle, he actually morphs into Batman as the battle progresses. This is version 1.00 and has the Rambo lookalikes as well. When the US version 1.01 dropped, those Rambo dudes were changed. Batman became Devilman, and Spider-Man became officially licensed with a color-accurate suit. The two superhero bosses also changed from a morph to Spider-Man leaving the area before Devilman flies into frame. Version 1.02 was the one Europe got in 1990, and is pretty much the same as the US release. Eventually, Sega created version 1.03 that changed Godzilla into a giant skeletal beast that looks rather silly in comparison. The final 1.04 version was done in 2009 for the Wii Virtual Console, and all releases thereafter. It was here that Spider-Man is no longer under license and is palette swapped to appear less Spidey-like. You also will notice that Sonny Chiba's likeness is radically changed on the title screen. To be clear, none of these changes affect how great this game plays or its impact on the Genesis library. They are primarily visual changes and footnotes for the more curious among you. The programmers involved here would go on to projects like Strider, eSWAT, Streets of Rage, and a number of Sega's Disney hits, so you know the pedigree of talent very well. But not everyone was in love with this back then. Famitsu, one of Japan's premier publications, complained the game was just too hard despite being well made. This stood in stark contrast to the near universal praise the title received in the West. For me, the 16-bit Shinobi games were all incredible in their own unique ways. What the Revenge of Shinobi lacked in the features of its follow-ups, it easily made up for in style, atmosphere, and timing. In those early months, it was a godsend for the Genesis library, and as far as I'm concerned, it's a must-have for anyone that owns the device. I'm Sega Lord X. Thank you guys for watching, and I will catch you next time.